I think we're getting the cue to feel free to begin anytime. So
All right.
welcome everybody. Thank you for joining our session. This session, we have a really nice presentation about sponsorships. This session is actually officially titled A Fireside Chat with Our Sponsors. So every one of our panelists here is a direct sponsor of a chapter of NAP. And our moderator today is the amazing Renee Lin. She handles the sponsorships out in Boston. And with that said, I'm actually going to spotlight everybody and have Renee just take the floor for us.
So let me know, Harris, is it now?
Yes, it is now.
All right.
Feel
Thank
free to
you.
begin.
Thank you for that intro, Harris. I appreciate it. I want to welcome everybody to our fireside chat, like Harris said. So today we will be talking about sponsorships as well as formulas for success, and hoping everyone here today can learn something useful for sponsorships to take back to their chapters. So I'll just briefly intro myself. So I am Renee Lin. I'll be the moderator today for this panel. I am in the Boston chapter for NAP, and I am the Director of Corporate Relations here in Boston. And so in Boston, we have about 7 corporate sponsors, paying corporate sponsors here. So we feel really happy and grateful for our sponsors. I manage our volunteer team for CRC. So we have customer success volunteers that ensure the happiness and satisfaction of our sponsors. And in my day job, I own and manage a niche staffing firm here in Boston. So that's what I do during the day as I do recruiting. And so let me just talk about the purpose of sponsorships. I wanted to level set all of us about kind of why we do sponsorships. So one of the things that I think we typically think about when we think about sponsorships is the money aspect. So all of our chapters do require some level of funding in order to keep the lights on. But one of the other things that I want us to consider, and I've been considering as we've been talking to our sponsors in Boston, is that when we have corporate sponsors, it does give us SNAP the ability to reach into our sponsors and these employers in order to promote and develop their Asian American leaders. So they have employees at these big companies that want to develop as leaders, and so part of the sponsorship also provides us that ability and that reach to be able to promote NAP's mission within these organizations, which is highly desired as well, to promote their leaders. So with that, I want to, Jenny Wynn is here. Hi, Jenny. So Jenny is going to be monitoring our chat. So we want this session to be as useful to you as possible. So any questions that you can think of, or any thoughts, please put them in the chat, and we'll address questions in the latter part of our panel. And let's see, so now I'd like us to learn more first about our panelists. And we're going to start with Kim, and I'm going to ask each of our panelists to talk about a little bit about yourself, your company, and what your affiliation is with NAP. So Kim, could you start us off?
Thanks. Yes, definitely. Thanks, Renee. So I am Kim Tong. I am the NAP Atlanta president. And I got involved with NAP through my organization, actually, through Bank of America, who I've been with for 17 years. Can you imagine? No school. Just kidding. But yeah, so through the relationship of our ERG group, Asian Leadership Network, I found out about NAP Atlanta and got involved with the Dragon Boat. And from Dragon Boat and years of paddling, I met some great people, got motivated and introduced to the board, and got brought in as corporate relations for my first year. We had some transition. I was probably in that role for a year and then transitioned over to the president, which this will be my 2nd year.
Awesome. Great. Thank you for that. David, do you want to give your intro?
Yeah, absolutely. Good afternoon to most of you. I think it's afternoon for most everyone here on the call. My name is David Dong. I am from Accenture. My position at Accenture is I'm in strategy consulting, managing consulting senior manager, and I'm aligned to our health practice, specifically in clinical innovation. I was made aware of NAP Los Angeles chapter, similarly to Kim as well, through our Southern California Asian Pacific American, we call APA Employee Resource Group, so APA ERG. And through the work, and I think building relationship is great, because once you find out and know someone from a local chapter, that natural kind of discussion just form. And recently there has been some great opportunities for us to co-share events. So looking forward to our continued Accenture partnership through the SoCal APA ERG with our local chapter of NAP.
Awesome. Thank you, David. And Michael.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Michael Mao, and I'm looking at the participants. I think I know a lot of you. I am actually retired from the CIA after 27 plus years of service. And currently I'm a consultant with Elevate Leadership as a senior advisor to their nonprofit Asian Upward Initiative, which is, I feel fortunate to work, with a group of people on projects that I'm passionate about, and work with a great group of people too. And fortunately for me, last year when I started my consulting, they bought out all my consulting time up and through the spring of this year. So that's always nice too. So I'm not actually representing any specific organization. What I'm going to do is share my experience. Having been in the CIA, many of you know I had retired. When I retired, I was the chief of the diversity programs there. And prior to that, I was the Asian American Community Outreach Program Manager. So I basically dealt with many diversity sponsorships and went through the decision making on which organizations we were going to sponsor, which ones we were not going to sponsor. And then also when I first retired, I worked for the Society of Asian Scientists and Engineers for a while as their development manager. And that's, in that regard, my experience was the flip side of the coin, where I was managing for the SACE, the nonprofit, our partnerships with all of our primary sponsors as well. So I've been doing that for about 25 years as a lead sponsor, and now once I retired, I was able to volunteer. Upon retirement, NAP Chicago chapter, even though I live in, I moved from DC to Orange County, California, offered me the opportunity to become a life member, which appealed to me because my roots are in the Midwest.
Thank you for all those years of sponsorship. We really appreciate that. Awesome. So let's get into our conversation regarding sponsorship and how we can help our chapters be successful. I think one of the first things I wanted to talk about, and I think is a key of this, is why do companies sponsor NAP? What is the value that NAP brings to organizations you're part of now, or companies, or prior companies as well? I'd love to ask David, how does NAP, what value does NAP bring to your organization?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I can respond not just about NAP, but I think our decision to sponsor in any way, whether it's monetary or not, sometimes it's also pro bono work, sometimes it's providing opportunities for our associates to be involved in an event as far as volunteerism. So there's many ways to quote sponsor. There's also true corporate sponsorship. What I can share about Accenture is we do go through a process, and that process is annually, and it goes through the North America inclusion and diversity is one aspect of it, but what I want to speak on is the corporate citizen wing of that. And what we do on an annual basis is to define and redefine our purpose. So the purpose needs to make sure there's laser focus on outcomes, achieving impacts at scale. It needs to have some collaboration and coalition, not just nationally, but locally too. And then looking at how this year we added some new focus areas of addressing inequality. So this year, every year is usually about 3 focus areas. This year is how do we accelerate equality for all, investing in skilling and leading in sustainability. So why am I going through all this mess? It is because we have to find alignment in goals and mission of our nonprofits, because you literally can be inundated with not just 50 or it could be hundreds of nonprofit in any geographic area. So having that kind of structure and focus gives us structure and focus in how we target our partners. So I think that is what I wanted to share, is finding alignment in the community and having clarity in the nonprofit organization goals and mission. That is enough just to sustain you, but every year through our grants process and corporate sponsorship process, nonprofit organizations need to have defined programs that are your focus for the year. You can't just ask for like administrative funding or sponsor an event. It's almost like, what's the market value? What's the impact? And how is it aligned to your nonprofit goals that goes towards some sort of program? So I hope that makes sense. I kind of responded in generality, but I think that's really the tenets of our decision in making any partnership decision.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense. Like there are certain social impact opportunities that you're looking for. Accenture is kind of watching and finding nonprofits and organizations that align with Accenture. Sounds like it's something that's really valuable and meaningful to your organization as well. Let's go to Kim. Tell us about kind of what value NAP brings to your organization.
Yes, thank you, Renee. So as I mentioned in my earlier comment about how I actually got involved with NAP Atlanta was actually through Dragon Boat. And Dragon Boat for NAP Atlanta is one of our signature events for the year. We also have Chopsticks for Charity, where we, through our sponsorship dollars, use that money for grants to our other nonprofits within our community that really have an impact. So as an organization, as Bank of America, we look at the organizations that we partner with through the grants to ensure that they meet a level of one of our pillars. And one of those pillars being community connection. And so realizing that Atlanta has a large Asian community all around, some of it mostly in the Northeast because of some of the diversity areas, but through that, of course, we realized as a company, this is a great way to impact, right? Through Asian Leadership Network, which is our ERG group within the bank. We work with NAP Atlanta, we get a Dragon Boat together. And so we actually get 2 boats every year in which we blend the membership and we paddle to show, to do a 200-meter race across Lake Lanier. And it's only a great event to, do exercise and socialize, but it's actually a community area where Asian businesses, other Asian nonprofits, other companies that sponsor Asian groups or have their own ERG groups will also do boating, have their own boats as well. And so it's a great way to connect with other organizations that not only promote, but want to lift up the Asian community. So that's kind of how Bank of America and Asian Leadership Network and NAP Atlanta got together. And we work in many different ways, from those 2 signature events, from our volunteer events as well that we do throughout the year. So, connecting with that community aspect and that feeling of what you do and can give as an organization back can be very impactful to your delivery of what you can offer as a nonprofit to a company such as Bank of America or other corporations of the same size.
And we appreciate that kind of community outreach as well. I can think of in Boston here in Chinatown, we typically have a Lunar New Year celebration, or was it August Moon? No, sorry, it's August Moon Festival. And there typically are the same corporate sponsors every year that you see. And it is a wonderful feeling for the Asian American community to see that consistency among the different partners. So we appreciate companies like Bank of America. Michael, tell us about value, NAP Boston and value.
Okay, well, I'm going to take this from a slightly different perspective, since I'll talk about federal government insofar as sponsorships are concerned, which is a little different than the private sector. So most
Michael, 1 second. You're cutting out a little. I just want to let you know.
Or philanthropic programs. So.
Hey, Michael.
Yes.
I just want to let you know you're cutting out in and
Let
out a
me
little bit. So
try.
I may ask you to repeat
Is that any
yourself.
better?
I apologize in
Yeah.
advance.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
And I think now we might.
Okay, let me try this. Is that
Okay.
better?
Michael, it may be
Any
helpful
better?
if you turn off your webcam.
Is that better now?
Only a little bit better, so not really. Do you want to try turning off your webcam, Michael?
Okay, now I just
Do you want to try turning off your webcam, Michael?
okay, and now I just reconnected. Is that better?
Yes, it's a lot
No?
better.
Yes.
Go ahead. Yep.
Okay, good. Then okay, so I'm gonna make these comments from a federal government agency perspective. For those of you who haven't done sponsorships with federal government, most agencies don't have a giving or philanthropic type of activities. So really, most government sponsorship monies are dependent on a transparent benefit to the mission of the government department. When I was at CIA, we were one of the few agencies that did have a community outreach division within the diversity and inclusion office. But even those events and activities had to be able to demonstrate a return on investment and benefit to the mission, which didn't include PR or marketplace branding because government doesn't get involved in that. So the most obvious outreach return on investment is linked to talent acquisition. And thus all of our outreach events had to have some talent acquisition element associated with them. And so why did we, when I was at CIA, sponsor NAP? And there's a lot of reasons, but I'll just focus on the 2 or 3 of the most important ones. One is the diversity case. And as I'm saying these things, for those of you in the chapters, it's kind of important for you to realize, okay, what is our brand or what is our value when a sponsor is looking at us? So one is the diversity case. Most federal government positions are still located within the Washington, D.C. area, where Asian Pacific Americans are considered a minority population. Very different from where I live now. If you're an Asian American and you're going into high tech in Southern California, you're not considered a minority. If you're trying to get into a university here, you're really not considered a minority. So, but in DC, for federal government, agents are still considered minority population and still part of most of their diversity recruiting strategies. So that's one, the diversity case. Secondly is the quality of membership case. So many NAP members are young professionals, which was the number one age group for CIA recruitment, not too young and not too experienced. Many members have foreign travel and some foreign language skills, both important to several critical hiring positions that the agency has. And the last one I'll mention is the organizational structure and leaders of NAP. So we could sponsor NAP at the national level, but we also sponsored it at a local chapter level. And the agency, has a national talent acquisition operation, and a number of the NAP chapters are located within geographic areas of existing recruitment activity and can be used as force multiplier events for talent. So NAP leadership has proven to be caring and competent, which is important because a lot of nonprofits, they only operate as good as the people they have. And the NAP leadership was willing to work with us, and they valued our partnership.
Thank you, Michael. So I think what I heard and from what we just talked about in terms of value is that one is that our sponsors see value with partnering with NAP because of one, talent acquisition. So they might be looking for diversity hires, right? That's one. 2 might be some community outreach, right? So getting the word out there about a sponsoring company being supportive of diversity in our communities, as well as in terms of company alignment and social impact, company alignment, what David was speaking about as well, that kind of social impact alignment for a company. The other thing that I would want to mention as I've been working with our sponsors is the other piece is professional development. So we've talked to different HR organizations where they say when they do like employee surveys that Asian Americans are scoring lower in terms of feeling like they feel supported at work with developing or have abilities to develop into becoming a leader in their organization, right? And we've been scoring lower in some cases at companies. And so one of the things is companies are interested in also investing in NAP because we provide professional development. We provide programming that helps their employees to develop their leadership skills, right? So that is another important factor that I hear quite often as well when we're on our existing sponsorship calls. So I just wanted to put that out there for us to consider as well. So let me ask this, right? So I'm in sales. I know how uncomfortable it could be to do that first reach out to a potential sponsor or a potential customer. Sales could be uncomfortable. So let's talk about, I'm going to ask Kim, tell us about what kind of strategies or advice that you may have about that first contact with a potential prospective sponsor.
That is a great question because it's definitely very challenging if you don't have a sales background of how can you get in front of someone without sounding salesy, but also having them not like ignore you, right? Because sometimes you'll reach out by email, right? So the first thought is, okay, well, how do you touch or get in touch with this individual or the group? Of course, you want to speak with the rest of your board or past board or your network, find out who in that company can we get a hold of that would actually be a decision maker, or at least find you someone that you can speak with. In most cases, if you can get in front of the ERG groups, which is one of the questions on the chat, if you can get in front of the ERG group, particularly an Asian Leadership Network group like with Bank of America, then you already can get kind of a synergy and focus on what you two are actually trying to work on, right? Because we're a Pan-Asian group. We're trying to promote our individuals within inside in the sense of professional development, doing community events and networking. So our pillars are very, very much aligned. So having that conversation with an inside group, talking about the benefits of what NAP Atlanta can offer, then we can build that relationship, right? Invite them to one of your events, introduce them to other members and other individuals that can really promote you. And that can definitely get that connection and find a way for that organization, one, to seeing the value of what NAP Atlanta can bring to Bank of America, to Accenture, or Elevate Leadership. And those are some great ways to like find out to get into the door.
I think that's a great point, and I can see parallels to in Boston when we are talking to our sponsors. It is typically an ERG leader that we are talking to. I think one of our sponsors, we work with the chief diversity officer, but actually that's pretty rare. I think the diversity officer typically wants to empower their ERG leaders to be able to make those kind of decisions and vet through the resources that they have out there. And so I would agree with that. I typically see it's the ERG leader, which surprised, being new to me, it did surprise me. And now I'm like, okay, now I know. Approach the ERG. So I appreciate that, Kim.
Approach your board. Look who your board is made up of. What company do they work for? You'd be surprised. I mean, look at all national leadership. They're all from large organizations. Can they introduce you to someone locally and to help you get into the door?
Yeah. So I know it's helpful to think about what a successful sponsorship looks like. I want to kind of change the question around because I think it's useful to hear about what makes a sponsorship not successful. So I think I'm going to frame my question in terms of think of kind of organizations, nonprofits that you have not sponsored or that maybe you had sponsored and then decided not to renew with them. So I think my question is, why did you choose not to renew with them, or why did you choose not to sponsor them? And let's see. So Michael, do you want to take that question?
Okay, let's try this again. How's my audio?
So far, okay, but I'm nervous.
Okay, maybe I'll have to talk real fast. Okay, so that's a good question, and it's an easy one for me to answer because I'll just refer back to my previous responses of course, why we do so sponsor organizations. So if organizations don't meet those criteria, that would be a reason why we would not do that. But so really it has to do with, providing a source pool of highly competitive potential employees. So let's say the organization has all the basic criteria that we're looking for. So they meet that threshold. But, most companies get many organizations asking for sponsorship money, and our budgets are finite. So we have to prioritize. So even organizations that meet the prerequisites might not receive a sponsorship due to limited funds. But another reason too is as we explore developing a partnership with an organization, because maybe they meet the threshold and everything looks good and we start working with them, is that the organization is not flexible in negotiating the sponsorship. Sometimes they'll say, well, this is our bronze sponsorship. This is how much money it's worth. This is what you get for it. Well, in many cases, as I mentioned, companies are different and what they want from sponsorships are different as well. So a lot of times I would look at a sponsorship and say, well, we at CIA, we can't do this, or we don't need this. Why are we going to pay for this and stuff like that? So really, and if they're not flexible in doing that, then or working with us, then we would just say, well, that's not enough return on our investment, so we're not going to pursue this partnership. And so really, if they're not able to customize a sponsorship to meet our needs in particular, that would be a good reason. And the other one too, and this is something that I notice with a lot of volunteer nonprofits, is when you contact them, if it takes them a long time to get back with you, or when you're talking, when you're working with them and they don't reply in a what you would consider a timely manner, that's already a lot of red flags right there. So, in planning an event that you're pretty much reliant on them to do. So those would be some of the primary ones, budget limitations, but also the organization or the chapter itself not being flexible to the needs of the particular organization. I made it.
You did. And so it sounds like if we have chapters where we have pre-planned, like you said, bronze, silver, gold type of sponsorship levels, that we may need to be flexible with that and listening to the sponsor, what they want, and maybe deviating a little bit from those exact packages to make it into something that's beneficial for both our sponsor as well as to NAP as well.
Yeah.
David, anything to add as it relates to when you didn't sponsor an organization and the reason why?
Yeah, a lot of time there's a defined budget every year, and the budget comes from, I can only speak to, oh shoot, sorry, that was something that just popped up automatically. I'm not sure what I clicked. I'm so sorry, you guys.
You're fine.
It's like a nice accompaniment to what I was going to say. Every year, we do have a defined budget that comes from national, and then every local, because I like how everyone here comes from a different local chapter, because when you work with large company like Bank of something or Accenture, the funding, there's a pool of money, but locally there may be a different pool of money. So that is always good to have that relationship locally as well. Unless your organization is nationally, sometimes grant can be submitted to national, but it gets divvied up nevertheless from different chapters. Well, I think that is always, there are variables every year that affect how much, or if any, that each nonprofit organization will receive. One of that is how many applicants or how many organizations submitted their application, and how strong and the worthiness of each of those grants application or corporate sponsorship applications. So that's one variable that the nonprofit does not have any control. I kind of maybe repeating myself, but have a strong reasons for requesting that fund, and that speak to the program for that year goals and everything else. And like I say, even if you only get part of the funding, you might not a smaller pool of money that you compared to what you requested, there's other ways to receive other benefits from the large employer, because you are setting a stage for a relationship that you should nurture ongoing, because it's not episodic, it's long-term commitment with a nonprofit. Vice versa, you as a nonprofit think about this employer as some partner that you want to partner with on a long-term basis. So that shows commitment. And the next year comes around, I think you are able to demonstrate what you were able to use even smaller pot of money from last year, and showing that kind of value, impact, and perhaps ROI really makes that employer feel like they want to give you more the next time, or consider you with the lens of having a better opportunity for you to receive fund in the next future. So plant the seed, don't give up, be persistent, do what you need to do that you're able to control, be competitive. But I always say relationship matters. Keep those relationships going, because once the employer or whoever, that contact person, feel like you just there for asking the money, they're not gonna want to continue that relationship. So I think it's important to keep the relationship with the employer.
And I have a follow-up question for you, David, but before we go there, is you made me think of a nugget, which is that what I've seen in Boston is that there are sponsors that sponsor our chapter, our local chapter, but they do sponsor other chapters as well, which I thought was fascinating. At first I was like, well, they're already sponsoring this other chapter, then I'm not going to reach them, right? Was originally what I had thought. But actually, that's not the case. Actually, they like sponsoring multiple chapters. So if you're a chapter out there and you were thinking my misconception the same way, as you can still reach out to them. They like sponsoring locally. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. Can I actually just echo what you just said? This happened just literally this week, because our grant process started on January 8th. So the application is due February the 12th, I think. So we have this Q&A session. That is one, I'm not sure why, but there's 3 questions relating to that. Actually, the more chapters, there's a lot of synergy. And there's obviously what we view on our end, on the Accenture side, is this is giving our employees a lot of opportunities across the country. So there's actually synergy, and you're able to be able to tap into the programs in different regions, and then speak to the similarities and differences of the regions. So I think there's a lot of synergies when you are rolling up chapter. It also shows coordination across your chapters, which is cohesion, unity. I think I like that. I will recommend that. So I'm so glad you brought that up. Something I did not think about, but it happened this week.
Awesome. And my follow, I know we have 10, I think we have 10 minutes left in our session. I want to leave some time for questions, but David, my follow-up question is for sponsors that don't have the means or ability to sponsor us financially, what are other ways that they could sponsor us?
Yeah. Pro bono work is always important. I mentioned the volunteerism, but co-hosting an event where maybe Accenture will kind of manage a lot of the administrative work. If you want to think about your members, sometimes we might bring swag, sometimes there's something that we give, and it shows the members that they are valued and they are just as important. They may not know the inner working behind the scene, but we advocate for pro bono work a lot, because there's always projects that we can put in certain funding on our end. There's different categories of funding, and those are great opportunities to ask.
And I think when we're meeting with our sponsors, if that funding isn't there, it's still build that relationship and get to know them and get a feel for where they may want to help NAP, right? I think they do want to help, and sometimes the financial aspect is just a little too difficult in the beginning. So just ask for other ways. Like David said, it could be swag, it could be in Boston, we've asked for space for our conference, right? So any of those, and I'm sure there's other ideas as well. So think about that too. It doesn't always have to be a money sponsorship. All right, I have one more question for our panelists, and then we're gonna move into our questions that Jenny's been looking through. So give us a tip So give us a tip for our chapters that are listening about how to be most successful in their sponsorship. Just one tip that off the top of your mind that you can provide to our group. I will start with Kim.
Yes. So in the relationship building, as David mentioned, it's all about relationship. You have to be persistent, right? Because when you start building that trust, communicating with them, continuing to talk to them will definitely be very important to get them to know you and want to work with you. So persistence in the communication.
Thank you. David, coming back to you.
Oh, same thing. Relationship matters. Use your existing network, do your research, customize your program for that year. And leadership is relationship.
Michael.
Yeah, I would say you have to be prepared by developing a strategy for increasing sponsors. So be intentful in doing this. The strategy should include, research what companies sponsor similar groups within your local area, an assessment on what can your chat, what can offer that would interest the organization to sponsor. Contact, and we talked a little bit about this in the chat, who will make the initial contact and then who will reach out, who you will make that contact with, whether it's the APA, ERG, or maybe a NAP member working at that organization. And then finally, negotiation. What's the sponsorship range and what portions are negotiable? And a long-term partnership management, who's going to be responsible for maintaining the relationship? And both Kim and David mentioned that too. The relationship is not what you want. You just want money to fund one of your events. We're going to give you money, and then that's going to be the end of it. And then you'll call us next year when you want some more money. You need somebody who's actually responsible for managing your partnerships or your sponsorship relationships. And then remember to be flexible and creative when presenting a win-win sponsorship proposal, because one size doesn't fit all.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And you were cutting in and out in the beginning. So what you were saying was doing your research, coming up with a plan, knowing your sponsor before you doing your homework before you reach out is what I heard you say. All right, so we have like enough time for one or two questions. Yes. Jenny, is there one or a question you can give us from the chat box?
Yeah, thank you all for the wonderful questions. Some questions that kind of came in the end that haven't been addressed by some of the speakers in the chat. There are a few questions regarding sponsorship, regarding local chapter and national chapter. So how has sponsoring locally versus nationally changed in our current virtual situation? And what is the difference for companies to sponsor nationally or locally?
Anyone want to take that?
Yeah, I think I spoke a little bit about this. Every case is different. So if what I have been able to do just past week I share is I just connect with the different people from the nonprofit because they have different people managing different chapter. And we start an email chain and I just ask them, can you tell me, is it the same program that you're asking for funding? Across the different chapters, and then if it is, like sometimes suggest just doing a one grant, but most of the is asking the employer what they suggest, and they may take that as a case basis. But for the three scenarios I mentioned, we recommend doing it as a roll up to one grant at a national level, as opposed to submitting three or various separate grants locally.
And I think what I'll add, that the other part of it to what David said was you can always ask, right? You can ask the company, the ERG leader,
Right.
You know, is it national? Is it local? Do you want us to do both? Do you want us to go just one way, one avenue? Let us know.
Right, because each chapter might have different benefits or needs. As some of the chapters are probably familiar with, yeah, like Bank of America, we do sponsor the national, but we also sponsor locally at the Atlanta chapter as well. So you can definitely specialize and personalize your sponsorship perspectives to what they are wanting to do. So,
Jenny, is there another question from the chat box that we could take?
Yeah, there's a question. How does your respective firms reevaluate your sponsorship agreements year after year?
Okay, let me try my my mute again. So if I'm coming through okay, a thumbs up.
the
Only
video
halfway.
is dragging it, yeah.
Maybe take your video off, Michael.
The video is
Halfway.
dragging it down.
Okay.
Take your video off, Michael.
All right. Now can you hear me?
Why don't
No?
you try?
Okay, I'm gonna just text it my response.
Okay, sounds good. Why don't you try?
Okay. So can you hear me now?
Only somewhat. Why don't you text the into the chat box like you said, Michael?
All right. Yeah. So typically at the end of each year, we determine what amount of money we are sponsoring.
Only somewhat.
Okay. Do you know what? Yes, I'm going to check my responses. All right.
Jenny, can you repeat the question? Sorry, I had an answer to it, but I lost the question at the same time.
On here. How does your respective firms reevaluate your sponsorship agreements year after year?
I think so. In Boston, what we do is we have a customer success manager responsible for each of our sponsors. So we're talking with them monthly, quarterly. We're sending events to them that are valuable to them. So we always want to anticipate kind of what they may be thinking before we get into that renewal. So what I would say is that you want to know what they're thinking before the renewal. Make sure that they're happy throughout the quarters, and then most likely, hopefully, unless it's a big funding issue, like they would want to sponsor again because they see that value. So that's the tidbit I can provide. I know we're at time, so I want to just encourage everyone, pick one or two tips that you heard today that resonates with you, bring it back to your chapter and try to implement that in with your sponsorship strategies. I want to thank our panelists for this wonderful conversation, for all the tips and guidance that you provided today. Kim, David, Michael, great job. Thank you so much for everything that you shared. We also want to thank Jenny for monitoring the chat for us, and want to thank everyone for participating here. And thank you, NLA, for letting us speak to you as well. And with that, I thank you again and hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.